Okay, ladies, at this point we're ready to start turning the heel. So to this point we have done the foundational cast on, we have increased and then would knit in the round all the way up until the point that we have our foot measurement according to your foot. And the directions for reaching that point or measuring to that point are found in the sock recipe file. Okay, so assuming that we've gotten to that point, we've knit far enough. Now we're going to turn the heel. So we're going to start by slipping the first stitch. You do not knit it, you just slip it as if to knit. Then you're going to knit all the way across until you reach the second to the last stitch. And I hope y'all are not using long needles like I am. The reason I'm using these needles is that I generally knit 2 socks at a time, which is a technique that I will show y'all, but not until we've mastered this. But I prefer to knit 2 at a time. It's just so much faster. So okay, we've come to this point. We have 2 stitches on our left needle. So I want you to place this yarn in front of that stitch. You're going to slip it off, wrap, and then put it back so it doesn't get knit. So this last stitch is not knit, and the second one you just have a wrap, and now we're going to turn. And don't worry, because I'll do this, just hang with me for a second and you'll see me do it again a few times. So that second stitch I did not knit, I just wrapped that stitch around it. Now I'm going to purl back across. Now we're not knitting any of these stitches. We're only working on the heel stitches. And I should have mentioned this before, but you want to be sure that you have a matching number of stitches. So if you have, for instance, I have 20 on this side, I want 20 on that side as well. And your number may be different dependent on your gauge and the width of your foot. So continue to purl across. And just like the cast on, this may seem a little fiddly at first, but it becomes easier the more often you do it, like anything else, right? So just stick with it. You're going to purl until the second to the last purl, just like before on the knit side. You're going to wrap and turn it again. So you're going to slide this. You're going to wrap this yarn and then slide it back. You don't knit it. So now we have a wrap and turn on that, and you can see that there's a little bit of a you can just see that it turns around there. So continue. You're going to knit all the way across. You're going to have plenty of time to practice the wrap and turn technique, my dears, because that is really what's going to turn this sock. It's like magic. And I do wish that my needles weren't so loud. I'm trying to stay in focus but not have them clink on this table. Okay. Now we're going to knit up until the point, so that was the first stitch. We did not knit, we slipped that one. We wrapped this one, and now we're on the one before the last wrap. So we're going to wrap and turn. Do not knit it. Purl all the way to the other side. Now, I'm not a big fan of purling. I think it slows me down. So I'll show you a different technique that I've practiced. I don't recommend it necessarily for this sock until you really nail it and you've got it down, but it's something that you can kind of stash away for a later time. All right. So you know what? I just noticed that the stitch is loose. Never mind that. That one needs to go in there, and I'll fix that later, so don't sweat it. Just ignore that. All right, so this was the wrap and turn stitch is right there. You can see it. So I've got to purl one more, and then I'm going to slide it over, wrap it, and then slide it back. Do the wrap and the turn. Okay, didn't knit it. We're going to knit across, same as before. This is basically this portion of the sock. Now I did call it a decrease, and technically we're not decreasing. It's shaping. So I'm going to rename that because it's just not technically a decrease. Some short rows do call for decreases, but my socks don't. I don't prefer it, and I think that it's easier to do it this way. So that was, I over knit. So I've taken it off the needle. I put it back because that's the one that I'm going to turn. So that's the one I slipped. That's a wrap. That's a wrap. We're going to wrap this one. So put that stringer there, put it back on this needle and turn. All right, so like I'd mentioned, normally I would turn and purl this way, but I'm not trying to confuse you, and just ignore it, ignore this, continue and ignore this if it's already too confusing, because it's not necessary. But this is just a way that you can practice when you're knitting lots of socks. Once you get the pattern down, I like to purl by knitting in reverse. So rather than turn my work around, I just knit it back from my left hand to my right. And I'll turn it around here and you'll see that it's exactly a purl stitch. And I don't use stitch markers here because it's pretty obvious which ones are turned. So I'll show you here. And you can see that was a slip, that has a wrap, that has a wrap. So I'm going to wrap this one. All right, y'all, never mind that train. In case y'all didn't know this, Jim and I live in a century-old farmhouse in Plantersville, Texas. We've got 5 little acres here, and we raise our alpacas and have our fiber farm here. So occasionally we have a train come through. I personally like it, but anyway, that's what that was. All right, so now we've wrapped and we turned. So we've got a slip, wrap, 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 and we're going to knit across, and you guessed it, we're just going to continue to wrap and turn the last stitch before the last wrap. So I just kind of get on by, and then once I start to feel like, whoop, I might be close, and I am. I went too far. I'm going to unknit that, and I'm going to slide it, place that yarn around, and then wrap and turn. And this time I'll purl so I don't confuse y'all. So I'm just going to purl across. And you should start seeing this heel kind of take shape here. We'll do a couple other rows and then we'll take a look at it. So that's obviously a wrap. So I've got to do this one and then I'm going to wrap it. Now, personally, I always bring the yarn toward the purl side. That's how I remember. So rather than slip and push it this way, that's away from the purl side. I like to slide it and then bring the yarn to the purl side. Okay. And I'll make sure to note that in the pattern so that it'll make sense when you see that you'll know what I'm talking about. So we've got the slip, the yarn, the wrap and turn, wrap and turn, wrap and turn, wrap and turn. And go to the other side and do it again. And what I love about these socks is nothing has to be perfect at all. My only suggestion is that if whatever you do on this one, take a note so you make sure that you do it on the other one. Because you're going to see that's the wrap right there. So I'm going to slip and wrap and turn. You just want to take note of whatever you do on the one sock because you'll want to make sure that you duplicate that on the other socks so that you can have a matching pair. That's when the knitting 2 socks at a time comes in handy because you know that it's going to be exactly the same because you're doing the same thing at the same time on 2 individual and separate socks. But that is a lesson for another time. Okay, so you've got slip, wrap, 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 and I'm going too far again. It goes faster than you think it will. So you're going to bring it toward the purl side. And right about this time, I like to just take a look at it. So we have our wraps, and we have our wraps here. And I want you to count the stitches that are not wrapped. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this would be a good time to end that heel turn so that we could get a similar turn, one that matches the heel. But I like my heels to be just a little bit tighter, so this is my personal preference. I will generally go one more. So rather than have 8, I'm going to leave 6 stitches on the back. And once you get used to knitting socks, you'll find what suits you best. I personally cannot stand a saggy heel, so I'm going to go a little bit tighter. I like a little bit of a sock hug. So, what? Y'all forgive me, I just keep going too far. This one needs to be a wrap and a turn. And then purl. And one more purl. And that one's already wrapped, so we're going to wrap and turn that guy. Okay. All right. You can see how that's already starting to shape and match what we have going on here. Okay, I didn't mention this before, but another option that you can do is before you start to do the heel, you might want to put a needle, like just take a needle before you do any of this and just slip a little piece of waste yarn across those live stitches, so that in the event this is confusing and you need to undo it, you're not going to lose your work. You can just rip it back to that place where you have the lifeline. That's what that's called, when you have a little bit of waste yarn holding those live stitches together. So that's a recommendation if you feel like you might want to practice this a few times without ruining the work that you've done. Now, I will tell you that if you work very gingerly, it is possible, and I do it all the time. I mean, I could just take this right apart. In fact, I've done it a few times just in this recording, ripped it all the way back, and then just pick up the stitches. There's no need, obviously, to pick those stitches up, so you're only dealing with a few. So consider that, and then I am going to do the increases. Again, I shouldn't call them increases, but we've narrowed the sock heel. Now we're going to turn it back around and get the other side of this built up again so that we can continue working the cuff in the round. I hope that the directions are clear. Please feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and I'll be coming up with the written instructions for this portion, and I will be recording the second part as well. All right, thank you so much.